Dutch subsidies boosted bicycle commuting by more than 40%, yet absolute head injury hospitalizations rose because helmet norms did not keep pace. This is Unintended Consequences, episode 100. That's episode 100, a big milestone. Thank you for being here. In the early 1990s, Dutch transport planners expanded tax incentives and dedicated infrastructure to move daily commuters onto bicycles. The policy succeeded in shifting travel patterns on a large scale. What it did not anticipate was that the sheer increase in kilometers cycled would outrun the existing safety culture around head protection, producing more hospital admissions for head injuries, even while the rate per kilometer declined. The Dutch government sought to reduce urban air pollution, congestion, and carbon emissions by making bicycle commuting more attractive than driving. At the time, modal shift appeared to be a straightforward public health and environmental win. Planners knew the Netherlands already possessed a strong cycling tradition and extensive urban networks. They therefore focused resources on removing financial and practical barriers to daily bicycle use. The measures aligned with broader European efforts to favor active travel over private cars. Decision makers operated with the data then available, which showed clear benefits from increased cycling volume, and did not yet highlight gaps in protective equipment adoption. One way to see the logic is to trace the arithmetic they faced. Each additional kilometer shifted from a car to a bicycle, removed tailpipe emissions, and reduced road space occupied by a vehicle roughly 10 times larger than a bicycle. Those gains compounded across thousands of daily trips, so even modest percentage increases in cycling produced measurable drops in local nitrogen oxide levels and peak hour delays. Because the existing network already separated many cycle paths from motor traffic, the marginal cost of adding more riders looked low compared with building new roads or transit lines. Planners could therefore treat the subsidy as a high-leverage lever that addressed multiple policy goals simultaneously without requiring new legislation on equipment standards. Between 1990 and 2010, national and local programs introduced commuter tax deductions, employer bicycle allowances, and continued expansion of separated cycle paths. Early monitoring recorded steady growth in bicycle kilometers traveled. Proponents pointed to lower per capita emissions and improved cardiovascular health in participating populations. Few contemporaneous reports flagged helmet usage as a variable that might need parallel policy attention. The prevailing safety culture treated helmets as optional for routine urban trips. As a result, the infrastructure and financial incentives scaled exposure faster than any corresponding shift in protective norms. A worker who previously drove 5 kilometers each way could now deduct the cost of a new bicycle and receive a monthly allowance for maintenance. The same worker encountered newly paved, lighted paths that removed the most common objections about comfort and safety. Over 20 years, those incremental changes accumulated into the reported 40+% rise in total bicycle kilometers. Because the policy bundle concentrated on removing cost and friction, it multiplied the number of people who became regular cyclists without simultaneously multiplying the number who adopted helmets. Bicycle commuting kilometers rose more than 40% over the 2 decades. Because helmet adoption remained low, the absolute number of head injury hospitalizations increased. Injury rates per kilometer fell, demonstrating that the network itself had become safer on a relative basis. The absolute rise occurred simply because the total volume of cycling grew faster than any offsetting change in equipment use. Second-order effects included greater pressure on emergency departments and trauma services during peak commuting hours. Third-order effects appeared in public debate, as rising case counts prompted questions about whether cycling promotion had been too narrowly focused on infrastructure. Parents and occasional riders, newly encouraged by subsidies, entered the system without altering long-standing habits around helmets. The causal chaining ran directly from volume incentives to exposure without a concurrent mechanism to update protective behavior. Once the pattern of rising absolute injuries became visible in hospital data, some municipalities began targeted education campaigns around helmet use for commuters. National policy did not reverse the subsidies. Instead, later programs layered voluntary helmet promotions onto existing infrastructure. No large-scale mandate emerged, preserving the cultural preference for low-barrier cycling. Subsequent infrastructure upgrades continued to emphasize separation and lighting rather than equipment requirements. Today, the Netherlands maintains high cycling modal share alongside stable or slowly rising helmet adoption in urban settings. The episode illustrates how an effective volume intervention can require a second, distinct intervention to manage the new safety equilibrium. Incentive structures that successfully change behavior at scale can alter risk exposure before norms and equipment catch up. Complex systems therefore benefit from simultaneous attention to both adoption and protection rather than sequential focus. When planners optimize for one measurable outcome, such as kilometers shifted, they can usefully model the downstream effect on absolute harm even when relative rates improve. How might current efforts to accelerate electric vehicle adoption or remote work policies similarly require paired safeguards that are not yet in place? That's unintended consequences for today. If this episode gave you something to think about, share it with a friend who'd appreciate the story. Subscribe wherever you listen, and we'll be back tomorrow with another case. And if you'd rather watch than listen, find us on YouTube at Nera Network, links in the show notes. And before you go, this show is part of the Nera Network, a family of daily podcasts on tech, science, and markets, each one a short, sharp briefing you can finish on the commute. If today earned its place in your feed, here's your next listen. Environmental Intelligence, the Environment and Climate Policy Brief for Canada. Find every show free at neranetwork.com. And on the website, every episode's visuals live in our free image gallery at neranetwork.com/gallery. Royalty-free under Creative Commons. Download with attribution. This episode used AI voice synthesis of my voice. Editorial selection and analysis are my own.